Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a story that's, well, kind of a hidden chapter of history. It's a story of royal intrigue, forbidden love, the kind of stuff that makes history so fascinating. And the really cool thing is we've got letters, biographies, historical analyses to help us piece it all together.
Yeah. I always find it amazing how even lives from centuries ago can kind of reflect the bigger issues of their time, power dynamics, and even how history gets written in the first place. It's fascinating.
Exactly. Okay, so picture this. 18th century Austria, right in the heart of the Habsburg Empire.
Yeah.
And there's this grand, lavish wedding. But beneath all the fancy decorations and celebrations, there's actually a lot of tension.
Yeah.
Austria's been fighting this costly war, the Seven Years' War.
Right. And Empress Maria Theresa, who was well, she was a pretty savvy political player. She used these kinds of big events, these spectacles, to project this image of strength, to reassure her allies and kind of bolster Austria's image. And so the marriage of her son, Archduke Joseph, to Princess Isabella of Parma, well, it was more about strategy than true love.
And that's where our deep dive really begins,
Mm.
with Isabella. Now, on the surface, she seems like something straight out of a fairy tale, right?
Mm.
Beautiful, accomplished. She spoke like four languages, played the violin, could hold her own in these, intense intellectual debates.
Oh, absolutely. Isabella was intelligent, charismatic, no doubt about that. But I think what's often missed is just how much depth she had.
Yeah.
She had this fascination with death, which, well, it probably stemmed from her mother dying when she was young from smallpox.
Yeah, that really comes through in her letters, doesn't it? It's like she could see how fragile life really was,
Mm.
even with all the royal privileges and all that.
Yeah. And she was very aware of the restrictions placed on women, especially royal women. She even wrote about princesses being, quote, slaves to the prejudices of the people. Basically pawns in these power games.
Which is exactly what happened to her, right? This whole grand wedding was basically a political transaction.
Yeah.
And while Joseph, he was completely head over heels for Isabella, it seems the feeling wasn't mutual.
Oh, yeah. His infatuation is well documented, we can say that. But Isabella's heart, well, it seems it was drawn to someone else, to Joseph's own sister, Archduchess Maria Christina.
And that's where things get really interesting, because we have these letters between Isabella and Maria Cristina, and they reveal this relationship that's so playful, so passionate. They're filled with longing and intimacy.
And, for centuries, historians kind of downplayed their connection. They would just brush it off as a close friendship.
Mm.
But when you read these uncensored letters, which thankfully scholars like Ursula Tomasino and Elizabeth Benter have brought to light, well, they tell a very different story.
It's amazing how societal norms can affect the way history is understood, right?
Mm.
Even suppressed.
Yeah. It's a good reminder that we need to keep re-examining the stories we've been told. What might seem like a hard fact is often shaped by the biases of the people who recorded it.
And these letters, I mean, wow. Isabella talks about yearning for Maria Cristina, about the inner satisfaction of just looking at her. It's pretty clear this went way beyond friendship.
Definitely. The level of intimacy they describe, the longing to be together, even the playful teasing back and forth, it paints a really vivid picture of a love that defied the conventions of their time.
But their relationship, well, it ended tragically.
Yeah.
True to Isabella's, those feelings she had about life's fragility, she died young, only 21. Smallpox, shortly after giving birth to a daughter who also passed away.
And her death had a huge impact on both Joseph and Maria Christina. Joseph was heartbroken, and he never really found happiness in his later marriages. He just kind of clung to the memory of Isabella.
What about Maria Cristina? How does she cope?
Well, she was devastated, obviously. But she took Isabella's advice to heart, the advice Isabella had given her about how to, navigate the complicated world of the Habsburg court. And she managed to secure a love match for herself with Prince Albert of Saxony. It's almost as if Isabella's wisdom and her strength lived on through Maria Christina.
Yeah, it really highlights how powerful their relationship was,
Yeah.
even after Isabella's death. And it brings to light another side of Isabella that doesn't get enough attention. She wasn't just this romantic figure. She was a sharp observer of human nature, of power dynamics, even gender inequality.
Right. She wrote about philosophy, social issues. I mean, there's this one piece where she argues that women could actually do without men, but men, to keep their power, can't afford to be exiled entirely by women. Pretty radical for the time, right?
Yeah, I mean, super bold,
Hmm.
especially for the 18th century. It shows just how much she understood about the structures of her society and how willing she was to challenge them.
Exactly. And it adds another layer to who Isabella was. She wasn't just going to be a pawn in their game. She engaged with the world, challenged norms, and she left a legacy that goes way beyond her royal title.
Makes you wonder, if she had lived longer, what else she could have done, what other boundaries she would have pushed.
Oh, for sure. And her essay on the fate of princesses, it really captures that feeling of unfulfilled potential. It's all about the limits placed on women in power, especially royal women, how duty and tradition just dictate their lives. Not much room for, making their own choices.
Yeah. It's almost like she was looking ahead to our time even, when women are still fighting for equality, still dealing with all these expectations, these invisible barriers.
Exactly. And that's what makes Isabella's story so powerful, even now, centuries later. It's not just, a royal romance or a tragic death. It's about being human, wanting freedom, breaking free from the roles society tries to force on us.
Recognizing that the past is still echoing in the present. Understanding how these historical forces are still shaping our lives, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah, and celebrating the people who dared to challenge those forces, people who refused to be silenced, people like Isabella who used their voices to speak truth to power, even if it took, centuries for that whisper to be heard.
Speaking of whispers, those letters between Isabella and Maria Cristina, well, they weren't meant for everyone to read, were they? They were just private expressions of love and longing. It almost feels wrong, like we're intruding on something sacred.
I know what you mean. There's definitely a sense of intimacy there, of vulnerability. It's captivating, but also, a little bit unsettling. But it also shows us the human side of these historical figures. We see past the titles, the pomp and circumstance. We see the raw emotion, the genuine connection.
Yeah, it reminds us that history isn't just about battles and dates and political stuff. It's about people.
Hmm.
Real people with, messy lives and strong desires and deep love.
And sometimes those desires and those loves, they challenge the norms and make us rethink what we thought we knew about the past.
Makes you wonder how many more stories like this are out there, hidden in archives or tucked away in libraries, just waiting to be rediscovered.
Oh, I bet there are countless stories. And each one could change how we understand history, broaden our perspective, connect us to the people who came before us in ways we never expected.
Because even though these stories happened, centuries ago, the emotions they evoke, the struggles, the connections, they're still relevant to us now.
Yeah, they remind us that we're all part of this ongoing story, this tapestry of human experience that's been woven through time.
And that each generation has this responsibility to uncover the hidden parts of that tapestry, to bring those forgotten voices to light and keep their stories alive.
It's like we're piecing together a puzzle, and each discovery adds another layer of understanding.
And the more pieces we find, the more complete our picture of the past becomes.
That's what makes historical research so exciting. You just never know what you'll find, what connections you'll make, what you'll learn.
It's like a treasure hunt, but the real treasure is the knowledge and the new perspectives and the connections we make across time.
And sometimes those discoveries take you to the most unexpected places. Like, did you know that after Isabella died, Maria Cristina carried a miniature portrait of her and her daughter in her prayer book?
Wow. That's a small detail, but so powerful. Really shows how deep their bond was. The impact Isabella had on Maria Cristina.
And it reminds us that even in a place like the Habsburg court, with all its grandeur and politics, these were real people with real emotions, real grief.
It's the human stuff that brings history to life, isn't it? That makes these stories resonate with us, even centuries later.
Because it's not just about events, it's about the people who lived through them, the choices they made, the people they loved, and what they left behind.
And Isabella's legacy, well, it's more than just her love story with Maria Cristina. It's her writings, her observations about society, about gender roles, and her impact on the people who knew her.
She was definitely a woman ahead of her time, a trailblazer for sure.
It's amazing uh, how starting with one royal marriage can lead to so many different thoughts.
I know, right? That's what's so great about stories like Isabella's. They really make you question what you thought you knew, and they showed us how complicated history really is.
Yeah. And her essay on the fate of princesses, it's like she knew what we'd be talking about all these centuries later. The pressures, the lack of agency, the sacrifices.
It really is insightful. She breaks down all the things that limit women in power, especially, well, royal women, of course. They have to be models of virtue, symbols of, stability, and they get used as pawns in these political games. And all while they're navigating a court that's full of secrets and hidden agendas.
And she's not afraid to call out the inequality either. Like her writing on the relationship between men and women, that was, I mean, wow, that was bold. Even today, some people would think that's radical.
Absolutely. To say that men need women more than women need men back in the 18th century, I mean, come on. That shows you how much she understood about power and how willing she was to challenge the way things were.
It makes you think about what she could have accomplished if she had, lived longer.
It does, doesn't it? But even in her short life, Isabella left behind a legacy. She was a critical thinker, intellectually curious, and she really wanted to forge her own path.
It's a good reminder that history is full of these untold stories, people who defied expectations, people whose contributions need to be remembered.
I agree. Isabella's story, well, it encourages us to dig deeper, to look beyond the simple narratives, and to look for the hidden voices that can help us really understand the past.
Because sometimes the most profound insights come from, well, the places you'd least expect.
And those insights often make us reevaluate our own perspectives, how we think about the world.
So, to everyone listening out there, what untold stories might be hidden in your own family history? What assumptions do you have about the past that could, maybe, benefit from a new perspective?
Because, just like those letters between Isabella and Maria Cristina, there might be treasures just waiting to be found, connections waiting to be made, and perspectives waiting to be shared.
And hey, who knows? Maybe you'll even feel inspired to write your own On the Fate of essay and add your voice to the conversation about history, society, and the human experience.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those deep dives going. We'll be here, ready to guide you through the fascinating and often overlooked corners of history.